Is Europe facing an energy catastrophe? Europe is heading into a crisis unlike anything it has faced in recent years. With its gas reserves rapidly vanishing and plans to stabilize its energy supply falling apart, the continent is teetering on the edge of an unprecedented energy disaster. What once seemed like a well-laid plan to replace lost energy sources has instead unraveled into a series of critical miscalculations. And the worst part, the real crisis is only beginning. As winter sets in and gas shortages loom, Europe is beginning to grasp just how fragile its energy future truly is. This energy crisis didn't emerge overnight. For years, Europe's dependence on Russian gas had been the foundation of its energy security. But as political tensions between Russia and Europe escalated, major decisions were made to cut off this crucial supply. However, it wasn't just Russia making the call. Europe's own sanctions against Moscow played a significant role in breaking this vital energy link. Now, as a direct consequence of these moves, Europe finds itself in an energy predicament that threatens its economy, industry, and even the well-being of its citizens. Understanding this crisis requires looking beyond just the European continent. The war in Ukraine, a conflict driven by deep geopolitical tensions, played a pivotal role in setting the stage for Europe's energy struggles. As the European Union imposed severe sanctions on Russia, Moscow responded by redirecting its energy exports to new markets, leaving Europe scrambling to find alternatives. But did European leaders truly anticipate the full cost of this strategy? In their bid to replace Russian gas, they turned to liquefied natural gas, LNG, believing this would be a viable solution. At first, this seemed like a smart move, diversifying energy sources to secure supply. But as winter approached, it became clear that things were not going according to plan. LNG supplies are limited, and prices have skyrocketed. Worse yet, the infrastructure required to import and store LNG across Europe remains incomplete. Ports are overwhelmed, LNG tankers are scarce, and the cost of securing shipments has pushed Europe into an increasingly difficult corner. Every single LNG cargo has now become a prized commodity, with countries fiercely outbidding each other for a limited number of shipments. This intense competition is only making the crisis worse. Europe believed it had secured its energy future, but the reality is proving far more chaotic and uncertain. The numbers behind this crisis paint a dire picture. Europe needs more than 100 additional LNG cargo shipments just to refill its shrinking reserves. This is not a minor gap. It's a monumental shortfall with no guaranteed solution in sight. The energy security of an entire continent now hangs in the balance, and no one can say with certainty where these extra shipments will come from or if they will arrive in time. Meanwhile, as global demand for LNG increases, prices continue to spike, turning the procurement of gas into an all-out battle for survival. European nations are no longer just dealing with logistical problems. They are struggling to maintain economic stability and social order. The uncertainty surrounding future gas supplies has created a sense of panic, and policymakers are scrambling to implement emergency measures. But even the most aggressive energy storage plans are beginning to collapse under the weight of reality. The EU had set ambitious gas storage targets to ensure reserves would last through winter, but those targets are slipping away faster than anticipated. Countries like Germany, facing mounting pressure, have been pushing for increased LNG imports and offering financial incentives to secure supplies. However, these efforts increasingly resemble acts of desperation rather than carefully crafted solutions. In the wake of Russian gas cuts, Europe has become heavily dependent on LNG exports from the United States. This reliance has grown dramatically over the past year, with US gas shipments now playing a crucial role in keeping European economies afloat. But this strategy comes with serious risks. The United States, while currently a key supplier, is beginning to face its own energy challenges. With growing domestic demand and shifting political priorities, there is increasing uncertainty about how much longer the US will continue to prioritize Europe's needs over its own. While the Biden administration initially lifted restrictions on LNG exports, there is no guarantee this policy will continue indefinitely. If the US decides to reduce its LNG exports in response to rising energy costs at home, Europe could be left without one of its most reliable alternative gas sources. This scenario would plunge Europe into an even deeper crisis, as its already fragile energy security structure collapses further. The stakes are incredibly high, and Europe's growing dependence on American gas is looking more and more like a dangerous liability. At the same time, Russia is not sitting idly by. Moscow has adapted to the new energy landscape by employing a shadow fleet of tankers to bypass sanctions and keep energy flowing to markets, including indirectly to Europe. This covert trade raises serious questions about just how much Russian gas is still making its way into the European market despite official sanctions. The existence of this shadow fleet undermines the narrative that Europe has completely cut ties with Russian energy. In reality, while European leaders claim to have weaned the continent off Russian gas, the secretive nature of global energy trading suggests that Europe is far less independent than it would like to believe. What we are witnessing is more than just a gas shortage. It's the unraveling of Europe's long-term energy strategy. The heavy reliance on imported LNG has left the continent dangerously vulnerable to supply disruptions, price fluctuations, and geopolitical shifts. With major economies around the world competing for limited LNG resources, Europe's energy security is now in a state of perpetual uncertainty. Energy prices are soaring, storage plans are failing, and geopolitical tensions continue to mount. The growing rift between Europe and the US over LNG supplies is another alarming development. While Europe remains reliant on American gas, there is an emerging shift in Washington's energy policy. As the US faces rising domestic demand and political pressure to prioritize its own citizens, there is a very real possibility that American LNG exports to Europe could be significantly reduced. If that happens, Europe will be forced to seek alternative sources, something that will not be easy given the global energy squeeze. The economic impact of this crisis is already being felt across Europe. LNG prices have reached record highs, and businesses and households are struggling under the weight of soaring energy costs. In countries that rely heavily on natural gas for heating and industrial production, the consequences are particularly severe. Governments are scrambling to provide subsidies and financial assistance, but these measures are proving insufficient in the face of the crisis. If prices continue to rise, Europe's economy could take a major hit, with widespread consequences for industries, employment, and overall financial stability. Another major issue emerging from this crisis is the growing energy divide within Europe itself. Wealthier nations such as Germany and France have the financial resources to outbid smaller, less wealthy countries for LNG shipments. This has created a stark energy inequality within the EU, where some nations are successfully securing gas supplies while others are left struggling. This division is fueling internal tensions and raising questions about the EU's ability to function as a unified entity in times of crisis. Amid all this, Europe's ambitious transition to renewable energy seems like a distant dream, while the long-term goal remains to shift towards cleaner energy sources. The reality is proving much more difficult than anticipated. Renewable energy projects are facing delays, underfunding, and infrastructure challenges. As Europe grapples with an immediate gas shortage, the urgency of the renewable transition is being overshadowed by the need for short-term solutions. The dream of a green energy future is now colliding with the harsh reality of energy scarcity. Adding to Europe's troubles is the growing influence of China in the global energy market. As Russia strengthens its ties with Beijing, Europe risks being sidelined in critical energy negotiations. China's increasing dominance over global energy supplies could put further strain on Europe's ability to secure vital resources. If China begins taking a larger share of LNG and other energy exports, Europe may find itself competing for resources in a way that was unimaginable just a few years ago. With no clear solution in sight, Europe's energy crisis is rapidly evolving into one of the most pressing challenges of our time. The continent's reliance on foreign energy, combined with geopolitical instability and infrastructure weaknesses, has created a scenario where its energy security remains in a constant state of uncertainty. The coming months will be critical in determining whether Europe can navigate this crisis or if it will spiral further into economic and social turmoil.